Good day, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Sison. My name is Roy Luther Agad, and together with me today are my fellow groupmates, Canar, Sheryl Rojas, and Ericka Tampus. For some reasons, Miss Princess Kisaiah Cueva could not make it today, but regardless, she has left significant contribution to our paper. And so we are from your first year medical laboratory science class, section A17. And in this presentation, we will be discussing case number 9 entitled Poor Alimentary Habit Induced Ascariasis, a case study. Today is October 13, 2022, Thursday. And so without further ado, let's proceed to the discussion. So, ever wonder why we are regularly getting dewormed by the government? Have we by any chance realized how damaging and deadly worms are, not just to our digestive system, but to the entire body as well? Fret not, cause that too is explainable by science. Parasites. So parasites such as the roundworms in this picture are known to be harmful to any living body which they see as potential hosts, either via exploitation, draining resources, and generally sucking the life out of the body. So our study talks about a worm disease, Ascariasis. The nature of the case, which we'll be studying, will be put into detail by Christine in the abstract. Christine?
And prior to the study, it has been globally acknowledged that worms are among humanity's hardest enemies to battle with. While most of them are perceivable by the naked eye, they easily twist games against their hosts by their adaptive nature, taking advantage of their minute sizes and the variety of passageways which they can enter. This case study shall discuss the potential Ascariasis diagnosis of a 14-year-old boy who was a native of a livestock grazing area in the northern part of Cebu. He was particularly asymptomatic for the early part of the infection and had eventually experienced abdominal pain, headache, vomiting, and notably exploitative action on his upper alimentary tract upon the physical examination. He was admitted to the hospital for emergent medication where his symptoms stated to persist on his second day of stay. Regardless, he was able to reveal his health and sanitation history, in which he had been admittedly accounts for eating raw vegetables and poorly cooked beef. Additionally, he refers to pipe water, conversely that from a natural pond, for his drinking source. Anthropometric measures were later detailed in listing 57 inches, 25 inches, and 31 kilograms for height, abdominal circumference, and weight, respectively. By means of action, 4 laboratory tests were requested to enumerate: 1 stool examination, 2 complete blood count, 3 urinalysis, 4 liver function tests.
Moreover, this study targets to assess the nature of the patient's infection that should ultimately explain the relevance of the requested tests. And this study hopes to catalyze sanitization awareness on the evolving society and remind practitioners on the indispensable benefits of safe food consumption. For further understanding, here's Sheryl for the history and background of Ascariasis.
I will now be discussing the causes, signs and symptoms, treatment and prevention of the case on hand, Ascariasis. To begin, Ascaris worms or Ascaris lumbricoides in scientific terms are parasites that lobby in the small intestine. To date, they have managed to become the leading cause of worm infections globally. These parasites breed larvae and adult worms in the small intestine, which significantly cause intestinal damage. So as mentioned, Ascariasis is caused by roundworms who normally live on soil. With that, the infection is easily transmitted when hands or fingers that have contaminated dirt are put in the mouth or by eating vegetables or fruits that have not been carefully peeled, washed, or cooked. People with Ascariasis often have no symptoms. Symptoms become more noticeable when the roundworm infestation grows. If symptoms do occur, they can be light and include abdominal discomfort and respiratory difficulty. Some people with a large infestation may have other symptoms, such as diarrhea, fatigue or fever, and nausea. Other symptoms such as cough are due to migration of the worms through the body. Ultimately, this infection leads to weight loss and malnutrition, which often victimizes children. Some of the most recommended antihelminthic medication drugs that get rid of parasitic worms are albendazole and mebendazole. Ideally, infections are generally treated for 1 to 3 days. In worst cases, the doctor may resort to surgery. And what more can save us from all these consequences other than observing proper hygiene and safe food consumption? It is best to make hand washing a habit, as well as proper cooking of agriculture and meat products. To proceed, here's Ericka for the components to be examined in the laboratory test.
Thank you, Sheryl. I am now going to discuss the four necessary components to be examined with regards to a potential Ascariasis case. Let's begin with the feces. Feces are waste matter that are discharged from the bowels succeeding food that has been digested. In an Ascariasis case, worm eggs travel through the digestive system, thus they eventually can be found in the stool. These eggs are normally seen to show up after a minimum of 40 days from the date of infection. Next, we have urine. Urine is typically a watery yellowish fluid that is stored in the bladder and discharged through the urethra. It is a solution of metabolic waste. Ascariasis in urinary bladder is an extremely rare phenomenon, but it is still of vital importance to keep a record of these subcomponents to detect a potential ureteroscopic manipulation of Ascariasis. Moving on, blood. Blood, as we know, is the primary component of the circulatory system. A known function is its transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide and from the different body tissues. Blood can be tested for an Ascariasis case to detect potential increase of a certain type of white blood cell called eosinophils. Ascariasis can elevate eosinophils, but so can other types of health problems. Finally, we have the liver. It may be unexpected, but these organ's components too should be tested. We already know that the liver is responsible for removing blood toxins as well as regulating sugar levels and blood clotting. A test, particularly ALT over AST, shall be conducted for this component to check for Ascariasis and induced liver damage. Complications in the liver associated with Ascaris lumbricoides include intestinal obstruction, ganglios, pancreatitis, etc., and notably HbA Ascariasis. Now, Luther for the resultant interpretation, conclusion, and course takeaway.
Thank you, Ericka. So, at this juncture, I will be presenting the results of our study. To reiterate, we have analyzed 4 lab tests, namely stool examination, complete blood count, urinalysis, and liver function test. And for a disclaimer, these tables, all of them are assumed tables, so they are purely artificial. But we have created them in such a manner that depicts reality as for a real Ascariasis patient. And so to begin, we have the stool examination, in which one of its highlights is the green-colored feces. So by common understanding, we know for sure that this characteristic of a feces is indicative of an infection in the small intestine or any digestive organ. And adding conviction to that is its fluffy and slightly wet texture, which only adds to the argument that there must be something wrong. And topping all considerations, we can look at the second row of the table and see the heavy presence of Ascaris lumbricoides, marking an outstanding rate of 35%. So it's the purpose of stool examinations, no? To identify the species surrounding or within the stool. And in this case, it is obvious. So yeah, while this alone is almost conclusive of an Ascariasis diagnosis, let's still try to solidify our claim by examining the results of other tests. Now CBC, and it has been earlier informed that we are particularly interested with eosinophil. It is apparent in this case that the eosinophil count indeed increased, leaving the other subcomponents within the normal range. Yes, it is suggestive of an Ascariasis prevalence, but it is also essential to remember that other complications, for example, the COVID-19 disease, also have the ability to elevate eosinophil count. So for now, we can use this result, but wait until it becomes integrated with the other tests. And then we have urinalysis. So the physical components themselves are apparently abnormal. straw yellowish in color, at the same time turbid, plus a fecal odor. That says so much of a digestion problem. Some microscopical components as well gave above and below normal results. So it's very challenging to say whether this has something to do with Ascariasis or not. Regardless, we can use this result and just assess the consistency of the abnormalities just as we finalize our diagnosis. Finally, we should talk about the liver function test where the highlighted requirement, the AST over AST ratio, did not meet the minimum accepted value of, which is above 1. We got 0.77. The minimum accepted value is above 1. So that says that there's something wrong with the liver. It's not functioning as well as usual, but it is unethical to refer as well to this alone, because just like all the other diseases, symptoms can be very flexible, and the only way to safely conclude with an ascariasis is to compare this result with those of the previous three. So we should integrate stool examination, complete blood count, urinalysis, and liver function test. And so, should we sum up the 4 tests up, it is safe to say that this patient indeed is experiencing ascariasis. His condition might be considered mild or acute because he started from being asymptomatic and had only experienced manageable symptoms as his peak consequences. So it's just like the typical ascariasis case, easily treatable just with sufficient medication. And yes, it is not very surprising because we knew from the very start about his eating habits, in which he eats unwashed or raw vegetables, improperly cooked meat, and even drinks pipe water. So it's already fortunate for him to just experience a mild case despite such an attitude. Now, we also cannot solely account his socio-economic status for his anthropometric deficiencies because working as a child laborer does not necessarily make you short. It might make you thinner as expected, but height and abdominal circumference is another thing. It's another case. So that would be a negligible argument. Some even become bulkier or fatter as they work more. So indeed, it is ascariasis that the patient is experiencing. Now for our conclusion, yes, while it is safe to say that the 4 test results combined make a decisive diagnosis, it is still imperative for future medical researchers and practitioners to devise further studies, procedures, and equipment to produce safer, more credible, and more competent findings. That's because the harder game arises when a certain ascariasis case detects no Ascaris worms in stool, no elevation in eosinophil, no strange parasite in urine, and no unusual liver dysfunction. Hence the question, are there any other significant factors or components that are referable in diagnosing ascariasis must be worth study. And for our lessons learned as a group, our course takeaways include understanding on how hospital mechanisms are needed to adapt with evolving technology. And we have also understood that medical conditions are strategically diagnosed using advanced equipment. We have also recognized that the use of HIS in laboratory analysis saves more time and more effort whilst providing more competent and reliable findings. And we have also understood that manual studies ultimately suggest less competency in recent times, and that overwhelming population of patients are made more manageable when handled via health information systems. In a nutshell, HIS is necessary at this point of time because laboratory mechanisms need to meet the evolving demands of modern technology and modern complications. And it's true that nowadays, manual work likely equates to inefficiency, so it is recommended to handle everything digitally. Our personal takeaways are attached in our paper, but to sum up, all of us had fun learning the course despite particular drawbacks from our end. And that must be the end of this presentation. Thank you for listening.